My husband cheated on me with his receptionist for 6 months. My parents blamed me and kicked me out of their house. But when I got engaged to a wealthy man years later, they came back begging. What I did left them broken. I'm 32 years old. I work in digital marketing for a mid-sized company, and I need to get this story off my chest because what happened like 8 years ago basically destroyed my relationship with my parents. And now that I got married a few weeks ago, all that shit came back to the surface in a way I never imagined. The thing is, my parents, Anthony and Laura, blamed me when my ex-husband cheated on me. And when I say they blamed me, it's not that they just said something in the heat of the moment. They literally closed the door in my face when I needed them most. But then, years later, when I got engaged to someone who happens to have money, suddenly they wanted back in my life like nothing had happened. I guess I should start at the beginning, when I was still married to Jordan and thought everything in my life was going relatively well. Or at least that's what I believed. Jordan and I met in college, like we were around 20 years old, and we got married when I turned 24. You know, that age when you think you have everything figured out but you really have no idea about anything. He worked at a consulting office, nothing special, but he had a decent salary, and I was also starting my career in marketing, so financially we were doing okay. We weren't rich, but we weren't lacking anything either. My parents seemed happy with the marriage. My mom, Laura, always said Jordan was a good guy, hardworking and responsible, and my dad, Anthony, took him to watch football games on Sundays, so I thought everything was perfect. We had a small but nice apartment, a 2016 Honda Civic that we shared, and plans to buy a house in a couple of years. I mean, the typical life of a young middle-class couple, you know? But things started to change like 2 years after we got married. Jordan started coming home late from work constantly, always with excuses like he had last-minute meetings or urgent projects. And I, like an idiot, believed everything because I trusted him completely. The bravation. Truth is, I should have seen it coming. Looking back, there were signs everywhere. But when you're in a relationship and you want it to work, it's amazing how many things you can ignore or justify in your head. He started putting a password on his phone when he never did before. He would shower as soon as he got home, which was weird because he always did it in the mornings. And he stopped wanting to have sex with me with excuses that he was too tired from work. I would ask him if everything was okay, if there was something he wanted to talk about, and he would just say he was stressed about an important project at the office, that he loved me and that everything would get better soon. So one day, I think it was a Tuesday afternoon, I came home early because a meeting I had got canceled and Jordan was in the shower. He left his phone on the living room table and messages started coming in. Lots of messages, and the screen kept lighting up with notifications. I'm not one of those people who check their partner's phone. Seriously, I had never done it. But something in my stomach told me to look, and when I saw the screen, there were like 15 messages from someone named R from the office, with things like, "Can't wait to see you," and "Last night was incredible," and a heart emoji. And I just stood there feeling like the floor was opening up beneath my feet. I grabbed the phone and unlocked it, which was easy because I had seen him put in the password a few weeks before without giving it much thought. And I opened the entire conversation, and basically found months of messages between Jordan and this woman. Not just normal text messages, but photos. You know, what kind of photos? And plans to meet at hotels, and even conversations about how I was a problem they had to handle carefully. I felt physically sick, like I was going to throw up right there. And when Jordan came out of the shower and saw me with his phone in my hand, the look on his face said it all. He didn't even try to deny it at first. He just stood there, frozen with the towel around his waist, looking at me like a deer in headlights. I asked him who R from the office was, and at first he didn't want to tell me, but eventually he admitted it was the receptionist at his office, a girl who was like 23 years old, named Rebecca, and that they had been seeing each other for almost 6 months. 6 months. I mean, half a year of lies while I worked and made plans for our future together, thinking we had a solid marriage. What happened next was a total disaster. We started screaming at each other. He tried to justify himself, saying that I was always busy with my work and that I had neglected him, that she made him feel special and appreciated. All the typical excuses that cheating people give when they get caught. And I was telling him that if he had a problem with me, he should have talked about it instead of going to fuck the receptionist at his office. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I stayed on the couch crying and thinking about what I was going to do, because although part of me wanted to kick him out immediately, another part was in shock trying to process that my marriage had ended in such a horrible way. The next day, I called my mom, like at 8 in the morning, crying so much I could barely speak, and I told her everything. expecting her to tell me to come to her house, that she would support me, that she would help me get through this. But her response was something I will never forget in my life. She said, "Madison, what did you do to make Jordan look for another woman?" And I went silent because I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and she continued saying that men don't cheat without a reason, that surely I wasn't fulfilling my duties as a wife, that I should think about what I had done wrong before making hasty decisions. I couldn't believe it. Seriously. My own mother was blaming me for the fact that my husband had been unfaithful to me for half a year with a girl from his work. But I still had hope that my dad would be different. So I drove to my parents' house, which was like half an hour from my apartment. I needed to be with them. I needed to feel like I had family who would support me in that horrible moment. But when I arrived and told them everything again in more detail, my dad Anthony's reaction was worse than my mom's. He told me I was being dramatic, that all marriages have problems, that Jordan was a good man and a good provider, and that if I left him for a mistake, I was going to end up alone and regretful. I asked him if I could stay with them for a few days while I figured out what to do, because I didn't want to be in the same apartment as Jordan, and my dad literally told me no, that his house wasn't a hotel for women who abandoned their husbands over anything, and my mom agreed with him, saying that I should go back home, talk to Jordan, forgive him, and work on my marriage like a mature adult. I stood there, in the living room of their house, the same living room where I had grown up, where I had spent Christmases and birthdays, looking at my parents as if they were strangers, because in that moment I realized that they really didn't know me or didn't care about what I felt. They only cared about how they would look if their daughter got divorced. My mom said something about what the neighbors and family would think, that divorce was shameful and that I should think it over, and my dad added that he had invested money in our wedding, as if that was the most important thing at that moment. I left that house feeling something worse than when I discovered Jordan's infidelity, because it's one thing for your husband to betray you, but for your own parents to turn their backs on you when you need them most is a completely different kind of pain. It's like the ground beneath your feet disappears and you have nothing to hold on to. You know what I mean? I called my friend Danielle, who had been my roommate in college, and I told her everything. Absolutely everything. And she, without hesitating even for a second, told me to come to her apartment, that I could stay as long as I needed. Danielle lived with her boyfriend Ryan in a 2-bedroom apartment. It wasn't big, but they had an extra room they used as an office, and they told me I could sleep there, and not to worry about anything. That same afternoon, I packed my most important things while Jordan was at work. Things like my clothes, my laptop, important documents, childhood photos I didn't want to leave, and I went to Danielle and Ryan's apartment. The following days were horrible. I cried all the time. I could barely work, and Jordan wouldn't stop calling me and sending me messages telling me to forgive him, that it had been a mistake, that he loved me, and that we could get through this. But I had already made my decision. There was no going back after 6 months of cheating and lies. I hired a lawyer like a week after moving in with Danielle. The initial consultation cost me like $1,000 and another $3,000 for the entire divorce process. Money I really didn't have, but that I borrowed from my credit card, because I needed to get out of that marriage as quickly as possible. My parents found out I had hired a lawyer because Jordan called them crying, according to what my brother Ralph told me later, and my mom called me furious, telling me I was making the biggest mistake of my life, that I was going to regret it, that no other man was going to want me after being a divorcee, and that I was embarrassing them in front of the whole family. I told her I didn't care what they thought, that Jordan had betrayed me and that I deserved something better, and she told me I was being selfish and proud, that pride was going to leave me alone and bitter. I hung up the phone and blocked her number. I also blocked my dad's because I knew he was going to call with the same speech, and I basically cut contact with them completely. The divorce process took like 6 months. We didn't have kids or properties together, so it was relatively simple legally speaking. Although emotionally it was hell. I had to sell the car because it was in both our names and we split the money. Jordan kept the apartment because technically it was in his name, although I had contributed to the initial deposit, and I basically kept my clothes and my personal things. During all that time, my parents didn't contact me even once, not even a message asking how I was. And when the divorce was finalized officially, I felt a mixture of relief and deep sadness. Relief because I was finally free from Jordan, but sadness because I realized I had lost not only my husband, but also my parents and part of my family. My siblings, Ralph and Esther, initially tried to stay neutral. They would call me from time to time to see how I was, but eventually, they stopped because my parents told them that if they supported me, they were going to disinherit them or something like that. Only my aunt and uncle Louis and Pearl kept talking to me, but they lived in another state and had their own health problems, so we couldn't see each other much. Like 2 years passed after the divorce, years in which I focused completely on my work and on rebuilding my life. I moved to my own small studio apartment. Nothing luxurious, but it was mine, and I paid for it with my salary. I started therapy because honestly I needed it after all that trauma. And little by little I was healing, although there was always a part of me that felt that emptiness of not having my parents in my life. I'm not going to lie and say I didn't miss them, because I did miss them. But I was also furious with them for how they had treated me. So it was a complicated situation of love and resentment at the same time. Danielle and Ryan continued being my best friends during all that time. They basically became my family. They invited me to dinner on Sundays. They included me in their plans. They supported me when I had really bad days where I didn't even want to get out of bed. And honestly, I don't know what I would have done without them. 3 years after the divorce. So, like 3 years ago from now, I met Adrian. Although everyone calls him Charlie. I don't know why. I think it's a childhood nickname that stuck, and nobody calls him by his real name anymore. I met him in the most random way possible. I was having dinner alone at a small Italian restaurant near my apartment. One of those places that aren't fancy but have good homemade food. And he was basically the owner, although that day he was helping to serve tables because they were short-staffed. He came to my table to take my order and we started chatting. First just about the menu and the food, but then about more personal things. He asked me if I was waiting for someone, and I told him no, that I liked going out to dinner alone sometimes. And he said he found that interesting because most people don't feel comfortable eating alone in restaurants. So we ended up talking for like half an hour. I had already finished eating, but he sat at my table during his break and we just connected. You know, that feeling when you meet someone and the conversation flows naturally without effort. He asked for my number before I left, and we started going out like a week later. At first, I didn't know his family had money. Seriously. He was super humble and normal. He drove a normal 2018 Toyota Camry, dressed casually, and never mentioned anything about his family background. Like a month into dating, he told me that his family had a pretty well-known bakery chain in the region, like 15 locations or something like that, and that he had decided to open his own restaurant with part of his inheritance because he was passionate about Italian cooking. But even after knowing that, Adrian never acted like someone rich or pretentious. He was still the same kind and genuine guy I met that first night. I told him about my divorce and about the situation with my parents like 3 months into dating. I was nervous that he was going to judge me or think I was the problem. But his reaction was completely opposite to what I expected. He hugged me and told me he was so sorry about what happened, that anyone who couldn't see my value didn't deserve to be in my life, and that my parents were completely wrong in how they had treated me. Adrian and I got engaged like 6 months ago, in February of this year. It was something simple but beautiful. He took me to the beach on a weekend and proposed to me at sunset, with a ring he had designed himself with a jeweler friend of his. Obviously, I said yes. I was super happy, happier than I had been in years, and we decided to post the news on social media because, well, that's what people do now, right? I put up a photo of the ring and of us with a simple caption like, "I said yes," with a ring emoji. Nothing exaggerated or ostentatious, but several friends and acquaintances started commenting and liking, including some people who knew Adrian and his family. This is where things got interesting, and by interesting, I mean horrible. Like 2 weeks after posting the engagement, I received an email from my mom, the first one in literally 5 years. She hadn't even sent me a happy birthday message in all that time. But now suddenly she was writing me a long email. The email said something like, "Dear Madison, your father and I saw on Facebook that you're getting married. We would like to congratulate you and reconnect with you. Many years have passed and we believe it's time to leave the past behind. We would love to meet your fiancé and be part of your life again. We have always thought about you and we hope we can rebuild our relationship. With love, Mom and Dad." I read it like 3 times, trying to process what was happening. After 5 years of total silence, of not asking how I was or if I was even alive, now they wanted to reconnect, just when I was getting married to someone whose family had money. I'm not stupid. It was obvious what was happening. Probably someone had told them who Adrian was, or they had investigated on their own and realized he came from a wealthy family. So suddenly I was worthy of being their daughter again. I showed the email to Adrian and he immediately said he didn't trust them. that the timing was too suspicious. But he also said that the decision to respond or not was completely mine, and that he would support me in whatever I decided to do. Honestly, I didn't know what to do. Part of me, that part that still had the little girl who loved her parents, wanted to give them a chance, wanted to believe they had really changed and that they regretted how they treated me, but the adult and rational part of me knew this was pure convenience on their part. I decided not to respond to the email immediately. I needed time to think. But like a week later, on a Saturday afternoon, Adrian and I were at my apartment watching a movie when someone knocked on the door. I opened it thinking it was the food delivery we had ordered, but it was my parents, standing there in the hallway of my building as if nothing had happened, as if 5 years hadn't passed without talking to me. My dad, Anthony, looked older. He had more gray hair and some wrinkles I didn't remember. And my mom, Laura, had gained weight and looked tired. But what impacted me most was the fake smile they had on their faces. That uncomfortable smile of when you know you did something wrong but you're trying to act like everything is fine. They told me, "Surprise, Madison, we wanted to come see you in person and meet your fiancé." And I just stood there blocking the entrance to my apartment, not knowing what to say. Part of me wanted to close the door in their faces, but another part was too surprised to react. Adrian came over and introduced himself in a super polite way, shook their hands, and everything. And my parents entered the apartment without me really inviting them. My mom started saying things like, "What a nice apartment you have, and you look very good, Madison." Thinner than before, passive-aggressive comments disguised as compliments. You know how that is. They sat on my couch as if it was the most normal thing in the world, and my dad started with a speech that sounded super rehearsed, saying they had been thinking a lot about what happened years ago, that they regretted not having supported me during the divorce, that they had been hard on me because they wanted me to save my marriage, but now they understood they had been wrong, and that they wanted a second chance to be part of my life. It sounded nice in theory, like it could have been a genuine reconciliation moment. But there was something in the way they said it that felt fake, like when a salesperson tells you exactly what you want to hear so you'll buy something from them. I asked my mom directly, "Why? Now? Why, after 5 years of total silence, do you decide to show up just when I announced my engagement?" And she got a little uncomfortable but said it had been a coincidence, that they had been thinking about contacting me for a while but didn't know how to do it, which was obviously a lie because a text message or an email doesn't require that much effort. Adrian was quiet, but I could see on his face that he was analyzing the situation, looking at my parents with that kind of look that says, "I know exactly what you're doing here." And when my dad asked him what he did for a living, Adrian responded that he had a small Italian restaurant, without mentioning anything about his family or his background. And my parents seemed almost disappointed with that answer, as if they expected him to say, "I'm a millionaire," or something like that. The conversation continued awkwardly for like half an hour. My parents asked questions about the wedding, when it would be, where, if we already had a guest list, and my mom even said something about how it would be nice to have a big wedding so the whole family could go, the same family that had turned their backs on me when I got divorced. At one point, my mom looked at me and said, "You know, Madison, it's never too late to forgive and forget. Family is the most important thing and we should stay united." And I felt my blood boiling, because seriously, are you giving me a speech about the importance of family after literally closing the door in my face when my marriage was falling apart? I responded that yes, family was important. That's why it hurt so much that you guys weren't there when I needed you most. And the atmosphere got tense immediately. My dad tried to justify himself, saying they had been confused at that moment, that they thought they were doing the right thing by trying to save my marriage, and that parents also make mistakes. But he never really admitted that they were completely wrong in blaming me for Jordan's infidelity. Then my mom changed the subject and started asking more direct questions about Adrian, like where his family was from, what his parents did for a living, if he had siblings. Questions that were clearly trying to find out about his economic situation. And I was about to tell them to leave when Adrian spoke and said something that completely surprised me. He told them, "Look, I'm going to be honest with you because Madison deserves honesty. My family has a pretty successful bakery chain in this region. We have like 15 or 16 locations. And economically we're doing well. But if you're here thinking you're going to have access to that money, or that suddenly you're going to be part of something by being in Madison's life again, you're very wrong. Because Madison and I are a team, and any person who is in our lives has to genuinely want to be there for the right reasons, not out of interest." My parents were silent for a moment. My mom turned red and my dad looked uncomfortable. And then my mom had the audacity to say she didn't know why Adrian thought that of them, that they just wanted to reconnect with their daughter. But Adrian didn't let her finish. He told them, "With all due respect, you didn't contact Madison even once in 5 years, not when she got divorced, not on her birthday, not on Christmas, not at any time, and now you show up 2 weeks after she announces her engagement on social media? You don't have to be a genius to figure out what's happening here. And if you really want to be in Madison's life, you're going to have to earn that right by demonstrating with actions over a long time that your intentions are genuine, not just showing up here with superficial apologies." My dad got up from the couch and said they weren't going to stay to be insulted in their own daughter's house, that they had come with good intentions, and that Adrian had no right to talk to them that way. And Adrian responded, "I have every right to protect the woman I love from people who hurt her deeply, whether they're her parents or not. And honestly, I think you should leave now because this conversation isn't going to get anywhere positive." My mom looked at me with those eyes like, "Are you going to let him talk to us like that?" But I didn't say anything, because honestly, Adrian was saying everything I had wanted to tell them for years, but had never had the courage to do. Before leaving, my dad told me I was making a mistake by letting myself be manipulated by Adrian, that men with money could make you believe whatever they wanted, and that when I realized my mistake, they might not be available to help me anymore. That was basically the last straw. I told them to get out of my apartment immediately, that they had had 5 years to be my parents and they chose not to be, and that now they had no right to come into my life with conditions or threats, and they finally left, not without my mom saying something about how I had become very aggressive and bitter, that the divorce had changed me for the worse, comments that only confirmed that they really hadn't changed anything in all these years. After they left, I started crying, not because I wanted them to stay, but because it was like definitively closing a door, like accepting that the relationship with my parents probably was never going to be what I wanted it to be. And Adrian hugged me and let me cry without saying anything, which was exactly what I needed at that moment. The following days were weird. I expected my parents to try to contact me again, but they didn't. What did happen was that my paternal grandparents, Ralph and Esther— wait, no. Those are my siblings. I got confused. My paternal grandparents are named Thomas and Margaret. I think— God, it's been so long since I talked to them, I don't even remember. Well, called me like a week later to basically scold me. They told me my parents had told them how I had treated them, that I had closed the door on them, and that my boyfriend had insulted them, and that I should apologize immediately, that it didn't matter what had happened years ago, they were still my parents and deserved respect. I explained my version of events, but they didn't want to listen. My grandfather told me I was ungrateful and that I was destroying the family. And my grandmother said something about how Adrian's money had gone to my head, and that I should come down from my cloud before it was too late. That call made me feel worse than my parents' visit, because I realized I had lost not only my parents but potentially that entire branch of my family. They were clearly only listening to my parents' version, without even considering that maybe there was another perspective. I told Adrian about the call, and he suggested I block their numbers too, that I didn't need that kind of toxicity in my life, and he was right. So I blocked my grandparents, my aunts and uncles from that side of the family, basically anyone who hadn't been present during the worst moments of my life, but now appeared to judge me. A week later, I received another email from my grandparents. I don't know how, because I had blocked their number, but apparently they found my work email, saying I had lost all sense of family and values, that I had a serious attitude problem, that I should go to therapy to fix my anger issues, basically treating me as if I were the problem in this whole situation, when they hadn't even bothered to ask me how I was in the last 5 years. I didn't respond to that email. I just deleted it and blocked their email addresses too, and I continued with my life focusing on the wedding we had planned for like 3 months later, in May. Adrian and I decided to have a medium-sized wedding. Not super big, but not intimate either, with like 100 guests. Most of them are friends and Adrian's family, who by the way are incredible people. His parents treated me as if I were their own daughter from day one. They included tell me in family gatherings, they asked me how I was. They supported me, everything my own parents never did. From my family, I only invited my aunt and uncle Louis and Pearl, who lived in another state but said they would make the effort to come, and a couple of distant cousins who had kept in touch with me during all this time. But the vast majority of my guests were friends, especially Danielle and Ryan, who basically were my family during the hardest moments. Like 2 months before the wedding, in March, my parents showed up again at my apartment, but this time it was different. They knocked on the door, and when I opened it, my mom was crying. Real tears, not fake ones. And my dad looked genuinely devastated. They told me if they could talk to me, and this time I was with Danielle because Adrian had gone to supervise something at his restaurant, and Danielle stayed with me for moral support. My parents apologized, but in a different way than the last time. My mom said she had been going to therapy the last few weeks and that her therapist had helped her see how her actions had affected me, that she finally understood how selfish and hurtful it had been to blame me for Jordan's infidelity, that she should have been my mother and protected me instead of protecting her image in front of the family and neighbors. My dad also spoke and admitted he had been a coward, that he had old-fashioned ideas about marriage and divorce, that he thought he was doing the right thing by trying to keep me married, but now he saw that he had only pushed me further away and had done more damage to me than Jordan could ever have done. The apology sounded more genuine this time. There were no excuses or justifications, just admission of guilt and real regret. And when they finished talking, they told me they didn't expect me to forgive them immediately, that they understood if I never forgave them, but that they wanted me to know they were going to work on being better people, and that they would be there if someday I decided to give them a chance, and that regardless of my decision, they wanted me to know that they loved me, and that they deeply regretted all the pain they had caused me. Honestly, I didn't know what to say. This version of my parents was completely different from the one I had seen 2 months before. They seemed humble and broken, not proud and defensive, and my mom said something about how if I didn't want them at my wedding, they understood completely, that they just wanted me to know they were truly sorry. I told them I needed time, that I couldn't just forgive 5 years of abandonment and pain with an apology, no matter how good it was, and that if they really wanted to be in my life, they would have to prove it over time, not just with words. And they said they understood, and that they would respect my space until I was ready. They left that afternoon peacefully, without drama or fights, and Danielle told me the apology seemed genuine, but that it was my decision if I wanted to give them a chance or not, that there was no right or wrong answer. The next 2 months until the wedding were relatively calm. My parents didn't contact me directly again. They didn't show up unannounced. They didn't send emails or anything. They were really respecting the space I asked for, which was new for them. The wedding came in May. It was a beautiful day. Like everything turned out perfect. We got married in an outdoor garden overlooking the ocean. The food was incredible because obviously Adrian made sure of that. And I was surrounded by people who really loved and supported me. Danielle was my maid of honor and Ryan was one of Adrian's groomsmen. My aunt and Uncle Louis and Pearl came, and it was nice to see them, although Uncle Louis is pretty elderly now and has health problems, so he couldn't stay all night, but his presence meant a lot to me. What impacted me most was how different it felt compared to my wedding with Jordan 8 years ago. At that wedding, my parents were there, but somehow it didn't feel genuine, as if they were fulfilling a social obligation more than celebrating my happiness. But at this wedding, even though my parents weren't there, I felt completely loved and supported by everyone present, and Adrian gave me a speech during the reception that made me cry, saying I was the strongest person he knew, that he admired how I had rebuilt my life after everything that had happened, and that he felt honored to be my partner in this new stage. His parents also gave a super emotional speech, saying they considered me their daughter and that they were happy Adrian had found me. And honestly, that day I realized that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people you choose to have in your life and who choose to be there for you unconditionally. After the wedding, Adrian and I went on our honeymoon to Italy for 2 weeks. It was incredible. We visited Rome, Florence, Venice. We ate like never before in my life, and I really disconnected from all the family drama. When we came back like 3 weeks later, I found a voicemail from my parents. They had left it the day after the wedding, congratulating me and telling me they hoped it had been a beautiful day, that they were thinking of me, and that they were still working on themselves, hoping someday to be part of my life again. The message was short and didn't ask for anything, just expressed good wishes, and that was surprising because they respected that I didn't invite them to the wedding without making drama about it. I responded to them with a simple text message, like, "Thanks for the good wishes. The wedding was beautiful. I appreciate that you respect my boundaries." And that was it. I didn't open the door to an extensive conversation, but I wasn't hostile either. I simply acknowledged their message in a cordial way. Now, 2 months after the wedding, the situation remains the same. My parents haven't pushed to be in my life. They sent a message for my birthday last month, another for Adrian's birthday 2 weeks ago, small gestures that show they're thinking about us but without being invasive. And honestly, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I don't know if someday I'm going to forgive them completely or if they're going to be an active part of my life again. It's something I'm still processing in therapy. What I do know is that I'm not going to rush into making that decision. I'm not going to let guilt or social pressure make me forgive something that needs time and genuine work to heal, and Adrian supports me completely in that. He tells me it's my decision and that he'll be by my side regardless of what I choose to do. My siblings, Ralph and Esther, haven't contacted me much either. I know from my aunt and uncle that they're in an awkward position because my parents basically told them that if they support me, they're going to cut contact with them too. So they're kind of trapped in the middle. And although it hurts, I understand they have to do what's best for them. Life now is good. Seriously. I live with Adrian in a house we bought together like a month ago. Nothing excessively luxurious, but it's beautiful and it's ours. I'm still working in digital marketing and I'm doing super well. I'm considering starting my own consulting business next year. And for the first time in a long time, I feel stable and happy, without constant drama or toxic people dragging me down. Sometimes I think about how my life would have been if my parents had supported me during the divorce, if they had been the parents I needed at that moment. And honestly, I think things happened the way they had to happen. Because if they had supported me, maybe I never would have developed the independence and strength I have now. Maybe I never would have learned who the people are who really deserve to be in my life. I'm not saying what they did was right, not at all. They caused me immense pain and there are scars that probably will never completely disappear. But I survived. I rebuilt my life from scratch, and I found incredible people along the way, like Danielle, Ryan, Adrian, and his family, people who showed me what real love and support is. If someday my parents demonstrate with consistent actions over years, not just months, that they really have changed and that they genuinely want to be in my life for the right reasons, maybe I'll consider opening that door again. But it's going to be on my terms and at my pace. Not because society says I should forgive my parents or because family is sacred or any other external reason, but because I genuinely feel it's the right thing for my mental health and my happiness. For now, I'm fine keeping my distance, focusing on my marriage with Adrian, on my career, on the friendships that really matter, and on building the life I always wanted to have. A life surrounded by people who value me, respect me, and love me unconditionally, not a life trying to earn the love and approval of people who only wanted me when it was convenient for them.